Day 212 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as Russia's devastating invasion of Ukraine. Josie here, and today is a relatively quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And a very quick update because I've got a great deal of technical difficulties out of town today, not the least of which is the echoing that you can probably hear in the background. So as always, I like to start off with some of the Russian personnel and hardware or military hardware losses. So we have, in terms of personnel losses, currently sitting at an additional 500 or so from the previous reporting period. So 56,060 there. Now, the hardware military losses, so the armored combat vehicles include a whopping 20 losses on the Russian side, a massive 18 tanks, 14 artillery lost as well, humongous, and an aircraft and a helicopter. So a massive day here is really what we're talking about. Now, I'll quickly jump back to the map here. Actually, no, I won't. My homegrown hobby that I keep forgetting to mention here, well, some days. Now, this is a slightly updated version. I have included 2 new fields down the bottom. Now, this is going to get bigger and bigger, and this is an example of it. So, as you can see, the 2 fields down the bottom include comms and command vehicles. These are actually quite rare and quite high-tech. Or at least some people that actually analyze these texts that these vehicles that are picked up, they find them to be not so high tech in comparison to NATO standards. And also we have the engineering vehicles. So this includes things like trench diggers and a whole host of other things there. Now this time we'll really move across to the map, but really where Russia has recently announced a partial military mobilization, which I'm sure you've heard by now. And off the back of that, in which at least 5 recruitment officers were set on fire in Russia amid the mobilization. And this was actually reported by a Russian news media outlet as well named Medusa. So already the Russian public sentiment towards mobilization already isn't that fantastic. Now we'll pull up the map today, we'll make things a little bit simpler and we'll start off in the Donbass region today. I rarely start off here, but it is a shorter video. So obviously some of the main areas of concern were just on the edge of the Kharkiv Oblast and the Donetsk or the Donbass Oblasts there. And if we jump back and forth, some territory gained, some territory lost. There's been a lot of talk about these areas up here. So Krimki, Alexandrivka, and Korovilya there as well. So you can obviously see the Ukrainians have pushed forward on this front here. What gets a lot of press though is Lehman right here, where you can see the 2 oinky/orky pigs there, said to be surrounded effectively still there. So I don't believe they can hold out that area much longer. Still, there's a lot of contested fighting in the Yampil area too. That's quite well reported on the news. You may have heard that village or settlement's name there as well. Now, nothing on the Donbass vertical, as I like to call it. Less and less it's actually becoming vertical because it's turning into sort of a more diagonal situation. The reason why it's less vertical is, well, if we go back in time, we can see these gaps are plugged in. In reverse time, they're plugged in by the Russians, but when you go in real time and keep going, I've got to just get rid of this one. It's taken quite a while. That's when the Wagner group had its own little shootout against itself. That was a bit longer than before. But then you just keep going forward and you find that basically, long story short, the Ukrainians are pushing all their way closer and closer to Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. Now, these were taken in about June time, and as you might know, Ukraine is now on the offensive like never before. Now, I know you guys like the occasional picture, so we'll just zoom out just a little bit, and I'll show you. So we have columns of smoke visible from Yasi Nuvada. Now, this is just northeast of the Donetsk city, within the Donetsk Oblast, of course, within the Donbass region. Donbass region, again, just for all you newbies out there, is effectively two oblasts. So the Donetsk Oblast, which is this one right here, and the Luhansk Oblast, which is this one right here. That's what comprises the Donbass, the two easternmost provinces, states, oblasts, whatever you want to call them, right here. Now, there's always an intensity of fighting in the Donbass here, particularly around the Bakhmut region, where I've got a photo here of one of the bridges destroyed in Bakhmut. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. It could be on either side. I do know that when a bridge is destroyed, particularly over a water, a natural obstacle like a river, then Russia has problems going back and forth between these. Ukraine is actually quite well equipped to deal with rivers and things of that nature there. In fact, you probably just noticed a moment ago when I was up at the edge of the Donbass, where they're actually going through and past the Oskil River there on both sides. You can't fully see it. This map isn't as up to date as I'd like it to be. But Ukraine good at that. Russia, not so good. Then we'll move down across to Zaporizia, where we have the wreckage of a failed Iranian kamikaze UAV. These are the Shahed 136 models. Now, this is yet another one of these Iranian drones. I believe Russia bought about 300 in total to help do the work, where they just didn't have the technology to produce enough UAVs in time during the war, or they ran out of many of their own supplies. Now we'll move down across to the Kherson region, where there are explosions reported in the Chernobylivka region. Now, this has gotten a lot of press over the weeks, probably the months that I've been doing these videos now. So you'll find it's actually right next to an airfield, a Russian occupied region in total, all of this here. That's what the red is for there. And Chernobylivka, so there's been headquarters around these regions here as well. So this may be related to the missile strikes, and it makes good sense. Headquarters right next to the airfield. And also, oddly enough, protests in Snarivka against the illegal referendums that are trying to take place. So here we go, Snarivka, right here. Now, this is interesting because Kherson, the oblast, the greater oblast, which comprises this whole section that I'm going around with my mouse right now, they were expected to have a referendum. Only problem was Ukraine came along and did its counteroffensive here, which was said to slow it down. And there are actual just genuine Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian citizens in this region, particularly in this settlement, that are ballsy enough. They are on the front line, but ballsy enough to talk about protesting specifically against this illegal referendum. And for those of you that aren't quite aware of this, so the illegal referendum to annex Kherson and all the other oblasts that are in red here into the Russian Federation to make it Russian land, which is just crazy. Almost no country will recognize any of these lands as being ceded and moved to Russia. Not just Russian occupied, but Russian owned, Russian motherland. And we'll just quickly move across to Nikolaev, where similar news to Zaporizia. So 4 Iranian-made Shahed 136 drones, just the same ones as the previous one I mentioned there, were shot down today in the region at about 8 p.m. Their local time. So it was said that electronic warfare caused this. In other words, Ukrainians with really futuristic-looking EW guns or electronic warfare guns. They're really cool looking. Now, Russian drones were said to be quite vulnerable to electronic warfare. It appears the same very much for these Iranian drones that Russia was supplied. Now, I hope my audio isn't too bad because I'm moving across to the news now, where it's a little bit less visual, but I'll put some pictures in for sure. So I never start off the news being too politically geared, but Putin is a very dodgy individual, let's say. And not just towards the rest of the world, but to his own people as well. You really have to hear this. So in follow-up to his recent partial mobilization of his military, in particular his reservists, about 300 of them, apparently, he actually did this by decree, by some sort of illegal means in Russia. And out of all that, there's about 10 points in this decree. Now, there's actually one of the 10 points, point number 7, which is actually an unpublished paragraph of Putin's decree that refers to mobilization of a lot more people. They actually hid item 7, as you can see. This is just a copy of it from Wikipedia, just in English, of course. And number 7 is said to talk about the amount of people being mobilized. Now, if you look closely, you've heard that 300,000 mobilization figure of Russian troops a lot, I'm sure. It doesn't actually say it anywhere here. The only place that it could say it is in the hidden segment, point 7, which instead says for official use only. Now, the reason why this is both funny and horrendous at the same time is because this information about point number 7, saying a lot more than 300,000 Russian soldiers, was apparently leaked from a Russian newspaper, who in turn had they were citing an unnamed source from within the Kremlin itself, so from within the Russian government. That said that point 7 here gives the Russian Defense Department permission to mobilize up to 1 million people. They got actually really specific in this leak, saying that they were sort of going back and forth on this number. Should it be 800,000? Should it be 1.2? Should it be 1.5 million? And they settled on a clean 1 million. Of course, Putin denied this, at least through his spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. But if there is one thing you take away from this channel or any channel similar to it, it's that Russia, or specifically Putin, can only be judged by his actions, not by his words. Just do remember that. Also note, this is quite specific and I think important. The decree on partial mobilization does not say only just reserve servicemen are subject to conscription. So it seems to leave the door open for all sorts of people as well. So you're gonna, and you've heard it from me, the 300,000 figure, but it doesn't exist anywhere on this page. I mean, where is it? It's likely to be more, and I think already the Russian citizenry in general is starting to clue on. I mean, I've showed you photos yesterday of people leaving in droves. The airports were all booked out in terms of flights. In fact, the price for going to, say, Turkey or Armenia, a place that doesn't need a visa for Russians, was said to be about 8 times the price of a regular ticket. These Russians would rather be alive and pay and probably go into a lot of debt on their credit cards, for instance, in other countries, and then go to the front line. I mean, who could feel any different, really, after they've seen what's happened in the last 6 months? Then we'll move across to some other news. So Germany is ready to take Russian deserters. True story. So it's hard to get visa or tourism access in Europe more and more now. But hey, here's a way for Russians to get it by going to Germany and effectively being a deserter. So they can have their cake and eat it too. What do you know? And in other news, the ISW reported that mobilization in Russia will not generate significant usable Russian combat power for months, as it will take a long time to bring poorly trained reservists to war readiness. And on the topic of that news, I may need to repeat it in another video in another day. I'm really sorry if the audio sounds bad. I can just hear my voice echoing so badly. But in terms of mobilization for Russia, Russia doesn't actually have a reserve force. A shocking statement, right? What they actually have instead were citizens that were forced to serve in the military from the ages of 18 to 27, and they did that for 12 months. which isn't the same as choosing to serve in the military, be it USA, Australia, UK, France, Germany, New Zealand, you name it, the West. Now, I won't get into the spiel today about when someone chooses something over being forced to do so, but the outcomes are generally a lot better when you choose to do something. But I haven't even gotten to the main point yet. Basically, these Russians that don't want to do military service, after they finish and get out of forced service, then some of them, or a great deal of them, are on reserved roles, basically indefinitely. And on top of that point, so unlike, say, your Western military like the US or whoever it may be, a whole plethora of the ones I just quickly mentioned a moment ago, they maintain their reserve forces, unlike Russia. Now, pertaining to the 300,000 or a million or whatever amount of reservists that they're pulling out, not so much active duty, but actual reservists that Russia is pulling out of the woodworks to get them to go to the front lines in Ukraine, they will be stepped up. So you can't get 300, 500, a million, that amount of troops all in one go, but they'll go in dribs and drabs to fill the quotas on the front lines, it appears, just like the ISW said, in a way above, paraphrasing completely, of course. So these Russian reservists that are called up that don't want to go, I'll show you the photos again if I have to, they basically get a couple of weeks training. It is said a month, but we know that it's really low quality, and it's actually to be a lot shorter. They need to fill quotas on a sheet for the front line, really ASAP, battalion by battalion. Or put in other words, Putin wants to take these men who served at some point in the military and rush them to fill the gaps that he has self-created to hold the Donbass a little bit longer. I mean, in his mind, it's a lot longer. He's actually, now this is a whole nother video on its own, but Putin is not known to be a great military mind, although he is actually said to be dictating the war like a micromanager in an office, bit for bit, part for part. And it's not his specialty. He should be taking advice, not giving it. I'd love to do a video on that later down the track. Now, I got a bit of information to go through, but I'm going to leave it at that, guys. I'm just really upset that I'm in a location that's out of town unexpectedly, and I can just hear my own voice echoing to the eons. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, guys. No funny today, nothing else, but I really wanted to talk about a little bit on the referenda and the mobilization, and something really interesting I found about the decree for mobilization and question mark how many reservists are getting called up, and do they want to even go? So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, show your solidarity and support for Ukraine with me and other channels. Don't forget about this war. That's the biggest thing. Complacency is a big issue here. We've got to stand up to bullies like Russia, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.